Welcome to another edition of Jazz Smack Postgame, where the Jazz took on the Boston Celtics at home in the Delta Center. Came away with a loss, but there were some big performances, and Collin Sexton played one heck of a game. Let's go ahead and talk about it and watch a clip of Collin. So that was Collin Sexton tonight, and he played one heck of a game. I think this is kind of what the Jazz could see if they were to use Collin in big minutes and be a primary option on offense all year. But obviously, the Jazz are kind of in a different place right now, and they're trying to develop the young guys. But this demonstrates what Collin can do and what he can still do on a basketball court. And this is why the Jazz need somewhat of a significant return when they do trade him. They are going to trade him, but they can't give him away because he is capable of nights like this. And he's certainly capable of more nights like this than what we've seen since he's been in a Jazz uniform. I mean, he's fully healthy. Tried some incredible dunk tonight as well, where he drove the lane and tried to put it down. But the guy has a lot of will, and he has talent, and we just cannot give this guy away for nothing. Thoughts?
It's interesting. He did this against Drew Holiday and Derek White too, like two fantastic defensive players. I mean, I don't think anyone in the NBA can really stay with Collin. He's just one of those players. It's like incredibly gifted. So he can kind of score at will, and he does it at high efficiency. I mean, he's a special player that way. But I think you have to play him to his strengths and not push him into ways that are his weaknesses. And forcing him to run into a system, et cetera, is just not what he's good at. Honestly, playing free and being a primary option is what really Collin is. And I think if he finds that role in the NBA, he gets to the right team, he's going to thrive. Remember how Brunson was in Dallas. No one even knew how good he was. Now, he was always that good, and he showed flashes, but no one really knew. And then you kind of get him in the right role in New York, and he's considered borderline top 10 player. And I'm not saying Collin's going to get there, but my point is that just you find the right role for him, he's going to do really well. I mean, he's a special player, and honestly, we've got the joy of watching him for 3 years, and I'm thankful for that.
Yeah, I think that if he would have been given some leeway, if he would have been given the Clarkson role and just not play Jordan and just given all those minutes to Collin, who, quite frankly, Collin is an asset, whereas Jordan is not. And if he would have been given those and given some of the freedom that Jordan gets, I think Jordan has way too much freedom. I don't want to just unleash a guy and say, Jordan has some T-shirt that just says, just let it fly. Well, I disagree with that. You got to have some parameters about what they can and can't do. I mean, otherwise it just turns into some loosely organized pickup game. But if Collin had received those minutes, we would have a much more valuable asset than we have right now. And Jordan isn't going to bring anything back in trade. That's not where Jordan is in his career. But Collin can, and he could have brought back more, in my opinion, than what he will bring when the Jazz eventually do trade him. That's my feeling on it. I don't think there's anybody that's going to be able to convince me that that's not the case.
Yeah, well, we'll see what he gets traded for, but you and I have talked about you think he's going to be a protected first-round pick, protected maybe top 8 or top 10, and honestly, he's worth more than that, in my opinion. But I think you're probably right in that assessment, so we're going to get something like that from Collin, or maybe a first that's well out there where you don't know what it's going to be. But he's a very talented basketball player, and yeah, you can't just look at his good games, but just look at his stats for the year. I mean, they're good. I mean, they're very strong. They're efficient. He's a very difficult man to stop. But what you can't do is Colin. You made this point. Colin's become better at pacing. I think Hardy has done a really good job with him, and give Hardy credit for that. He plays now with pace where he never used to. It was one speed, and the reality is Donovan's so good because he plays with pace. He has different speeds that he plays at. And Colin has picked up some of that in the last few years, and I think give Hardy credit for that. But the reality is that you can't force Colin to do things that he's not good at, because then he struggles, and that's where we see more often than not the last 3 years is you're trying to make Colin who he's not, and he struggles at it. And honestly, I don't think he'll ever be good at certain things, but that's okay, right? There's how many perfect players are there in the NBA? Well, Michael Jordan, right? But there's very few. They all have weaknesses. So, you just got to accept what they have and, try to accentuate their positives. And tonight was Colin. And it was fun. I mean, it was really fun to watch him tonight.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that obviously if you're working with a 6-foot guy who's technically and all of his skills are more towards the 2 guard rather than the point guard, you can go in there and say, okay, there's nowhere for this guy to play in the NBA. But the reality is that Jalen Brunson is a 2 guard. Peyton Pritchard, who plays a role for the Celtics, that guy's not a point guard. That guy's a 6-foot tall 2 guard. I mean, there are other 2 guards who are 6 feet tall who play significant roles in the NBA. So I think that those people out there who say that Colin's just an undersized 2 guard and he doesn't have a role in the NBA, I think those people are wrong. Now, I don't hear a lot of that, but there's obviously is some of that. And Collin is certainly more so a 2 guard than he is a point guard, and trying to turn him into a point guard in the same way that the Jazz have tried to turn, at least last year, tried to turn Keontae into a point guard. I don't believe that that's Collin's role. I don't think that's where he can thrive. So, but he certainly has a role in the NBA, and he has a role in the NBA for a long time to come, especially if he gets in the right situation.
Well, before we go to the box score, let me throw something out, because we've heard a lot of Jazz prognosticators, and this is what people assume Ainge is taking the position. And I don't know. I've never had a personal conversation with Ainge, so I have no idea what his positions are or not. I'm guessing that he only wants big guys, right? That he's trying to draft for size. Well, I'm going to go to the deeply flawed Ringer Top 100, and I'm going to read you off the top 15 players. And you tell me how many of these players that you would love to have that are allegedly undersized. And before we even get to that, why don't we talk about John Stockton? Would John Stockton be good in today's NBA?
In the right situation. In some situations, I don't even think he'd play. The right situation, he'd be just as good as he was back then. I mean, certainly just as valuable.
No hand checking, 38% from the 3, and this is a guy who wasn't shooting a lot. So, if you're emphasizing the 3, all those old players get better 3-point shooters. I think he'd do extremely well, and he's undersized. Chris Paul, still playing, undersized, maybe best passer in the league. Fantastic, right? Player. So let me read off some other ones. So Jokic, no, not undersized. Shea, not undersized. Giannis, not undersized. Tatum, that's a joke, but not undersized. Luka, not undersized. Stephen Curry.
Yeah.
Stephen Curry, how good has Stephen Curry been the last 15 years? Completely undersized, right? Understrength, undersized. Stephen Curry, LeBron James, not undersized. Don, undersized, right? Anthony Edwards, not undersized. Victor, not undersized. Kevin Durant, not undersized. Anthony Davis, Jalen Brunson, 13th. Karl Anthony Towns, wow. I can't believe they're putting Karl Anthony Towns. What's Booker's height?
6'6".
Okay, so he's not undersized. Evan Mobley, wow, this is a crazy ranking. Cade Cunningham, Jaylen Brown, and Tyrese. And Tyrese is not undersized either. So there's 3. there's 3 guys in the top 20, the undersized, but one of those guys in there for a while, Steph Curry was, arguably considered the best guy in the game, right? And has changed the game in a lot of different ways, in ways that you and I don't like it, but we can't take away from how good that guy is. Don's fantastic, right? Brunson's fantastic. And there's other guys that, Garland and these other guys that are in there. Look, their size in basketball helps. No one's going to deny that. Like if you have extra size, it helps you. But you can't pass over these players that have tremendous skills that are undersized. Steph Curry, Don, these guys, they're amazing basketball players. And just because you're undersized, that's one disadvantage you have. I get it. But if they have so many other skills, you got it. You can't just like pass over, they're too small for their role. They're not. You just got to match them, as you said, with the right, complementary players.
Yeah, you got to put him in the right situation. I mean, Steph's obviously a 2 guard, but he's kind of playing the combo guard position, but he's not a point guard. I mean, people will say that he's a point guard. He's not a point guard. He was never a point guard. He wasn't a point guard in college. He's just not a point. He's a 2 guard. That's what he is. And you're right. He's certainly undersized as a 2 guard / combo guard. I mean, he's very thin. He's frail. He's not particularly strong. I saw somebody bodied him up a couple weeks ago, and he was about to throw the ball at him. That's due to his size. He's just a very slightly built person, and he's never really bulked up in any meaningful way. And I think that's benefited him because it's allowed him to keep his quickness into his, mid-30s, which he still is a reasonably good athlete for his age, certainly. So he's done well, and you're right. You just got to put him in the right position. That's the whole key. I mean, you can't have a whole undersized team, but Draymond Green is a very undersized at his position. He has a really good wingspan, but he was known as one of the best defensive players in the NBA, being undersized power forward. And so it can be done. You just got to you need to evaluate the person's strengths and then put them into a position where they can succeed. And they did that with Draymond, a terrible offensive player other than his passing. He's a great passer, and he's a terrific defender, and they utilized those skills to make Golden State the best basketball team in the league over the past, probably decade or so.
Yeah. Yeah. And they had one season where they had the best record ever in the NBA. Yeah. I mean, they were unbeatable that season because Steph created so much havoc with his shooting that there was always openings, and then Draymond filled in like defensively and passing. It was an unbeatable team. I mean, it was amazing how good that team was with guys that honestly weren't that good. Let's face it. Other than Steph, they weren't that good, but they really worked well together. I mean, Klay Thompson is one of the most overrated players in NBA history, in my opinion. Second best shooter in the NBA. No way. Like, good shooter? Yeah. Not a bad player. I'm not saying he is, but it was Curry. It was all Curry. This undersized, frail guy, it was all Curry. And now who's the best player in New York? It's Brunson, right? It's Brunson by far. It's not Towns. I mean, Minnesota wanted to trade away Towns. It's Brunson. He's undersized. So don't just look at a player and say, look, this guy doesn't meet what I want, a 6'9", Magic Johnson style point guard. You don't need that, right? Yeah, ideally you get that player, but there's very few of those players. But these other guys are good. And honestly, you can often get them on the cheap because, players, people like Ainge say, look, only get the big guys. Anyhow, I'm going off on a tangent, so why don't we get back to the game?
All right. Well, let's take a look at the box score and just briefly go through that and take away the highlights. But to me, obviously, the Collin Sexton 12 for 16 and the 4 for 6 from 3, 2 for 3 from the free throw line, the 2 rebounds, 3 assists, 1 steal, 30 points. I mean, yeah, that's an unbelievable stat line. And obviously we started out talking about that because that's the highlight of tonight for the Jazz is that stat line. But in addition to that, I mean, Keontae also played big minutes at 33 and took 16 shots. And he went 5 for 9 from 3 and had 7 assists and 3 turnovers. and he scored 19 as well. So this was also a good night for Keontae. He shot the ball reasonably well, and he shot the ball well from three, and he also did get 7 assists. So I would say those are the two bright spots from the Jazz standpoint in terms of offense. Now we could go back to the defensive side, and there were some obviously real lapses, and the Jazz still aren't forcing any turnovers and all those things. And we all know that all those problems exist, and they have yet to be really addressed in a meaningful way. And we'll see what Ainge says about that, coming up shortly at the end of the season in his after postseason press conference. And I'm actually curious to see what he's going to say, because he said last year that, how the defense must improve, and here we are sitting here again, and nothing real positive is taking place other than you can look at Walker Kessler and saying, okay, he's been really good, but what else is there to really hang your hat on? There isn't anything. But that's just looking at from his team standpoint. So I'm curious to see what Ainge has to say about that. But from the box score, it's really Collin Sexton and Keontae George tonight.
Yeah, it's there's a few things on Walker's line I liked. I really liked the 6 assists. He made a really nice pass to Cody Williams cutting for a dunk. I mean, it was a really nice pass. I mean, he was behind him. He saw him. I was very impressed by that. And I also like the fact that Walker only had one three-pointer tonight. That was really nice to see, a really nice change. Of course, he didn't hit it, but it was it was nice, like playing where he should be playing. Hopefully he's got that out of his system, that he's a 3-point gunner, and he's, but in back to 6 offensive rebounds, the best offensive rebounder in the league.
Yeah. It's I actually hope that they, over the last 10 games of the season, I hope they actually give Walker a few more opportunities, but not threes. I don't want him shooting threes. Give him a few more opportunities. Mm-hmm. Repetitions where it can actually help him, and something that can actually help the Jazz in the future. Shooting threes isn't the best thing for Walker. It's not the best thing for the team, especially when Walker's shooting, 15% or whatever he's shooting right now, because he's missed all these threes over the last few games. So I don't think those are the repetitions that help him learn. I would prefer other repetitions around the basket and try and convince him to go up through people and try and muscle people that are smaller than him. I would love to see that. And I hope that that's the case over the next 10 games. And I hope that Walker actually plays most of these games, especially the games where the Jazz can lose, even though they're playing Walker Kessler. And I kind of hope that this is the lineup for the rest of the season, in all honesty. I'd prefer that those other guys just sit the rest of the games out at this point. I don't think it helps to play those guys anymore.
The only one I just wonder, just because we both feel that Larry's trade value has gone down, that, do we try to play him? But if it's not going to improve this year because his back is bad, that's not going to help. We might as well sit him. But John Collins, I don't think it'll make his value go up or down. I think he's had a fantastic year. I think other teams realize they're sitting him. They don't think he's hurt. They're if they're interested in him, I think they'll make the same offer. The challenge that we've talked about with John is, he can opt out. This is a player option year. He can opt out, and that may be what he does, because there are not, most teams are capped out, but some of the lesser teams that are on the coming up, they're not. And I imagine like a Detroit Pistons is not capped out, and why not take a shot at a John Collins? To me, that's an upgrade for them if they were to do that. So I do think there's some teams, and maybe San Antonio, that hasn't capped out. Well, maybe with Fox they have capped out. I don't know. But, there's probably some teams out there. So we'll see what happens to John. We'll see. I mean, we got to let our young guys try to prove themselves, go through Cody, we need to let him keep going out there and chucking and trying and seeing if he can put it together, right? We need him to do that. So I agree with you. I mean, this would be fine if they continue to play that. I'd like to jigger the minutes a bit and give some to Kyle and Bryce and fewer to Keontae, but you and I are not going to win that argument.
Yeah, I still understand Kyle's minutes, man. They fluctuate so much, and he's obviously one of the valuable pieces. But on the other hand, he hasn't got a ton of minutes, so I assume that he will play Summer League this summer, and it'll be interesting to see he and Cody.
Mm-hmm.
And I would assume that actually Isaiah plays Summer League as well.
Mm-hmm.
And between those guys and the rookies that the Jazz will bring in this year, it should be another interesting and fun Summer League in both Salt Lake and Vegas. So I think there's certainly things to look forward to from a Jazz standpoint. Until next season starts, we're going to have a good summer league. We're going to have the lottery. We're going to have the draft, and all those things are really important to the Jazz's future. So I think that those are events, each of those that all Jazz fans should probably pay attention to because they are so meaningful in what happens to the Jazz's future. I mean, I think that the lottery and the draft are going to be. I think they could completely dictate what the Jazz decide to do, going forward, even starting next year. So lots of things to look forward to in the coming months.
Yeah, well, one nice thing, and I know you're going to go to Tankathon, is I believe before tonight, I don't know what happened tonight. Before tonight, Phoenix had moved up to the number 10 spot. And I got to tell you, who would you rather, like if you're trying to think, we hope Minnesota gets knocked out because then they're in the lottery. We know that broken down Dallas is not going to be able to do it. Like Dallas is one of the teams that's not going to make it through, right? That's a given. If I think Phoenix is a dangerous team because they got, look, Durant and Booker can go crazy. Booker in particular can put up 50, 60 on a night. So I want them to be one of those teams because I think that gives us the best chance of maybe knocking out Minnesota. I still think it's a long shot, but I think that gives us the best chance. So that's good to see. And I think Minnesota won tonight, but they'd lost 3 in a row before that. So do you want to go to Tankathon?
So the current standings, go ahead and refresh. So the current standings, Jazz sit at 16. Washington sits at 15 wins. Jazz at 16 wins. Charlotte at 18 wins. So we are looking good. There are right now there are 11 games left in the season. So 11 games left, and Charlotte remains 2 games ahead of us in the win column. I think we're exactly where we want to be, considering we've gone 1-9 over the last 10. I think we're in good shot to finish one of the 2 worst records, which is exactly where we want to be. And New Orleans has 19 wins. So those are the teams, and there's no way that the Jazz could ever catch Philadelphia, even if they tried. So the Jazz will finish with one of the worst 4, and almost assuredly one of the worst 3.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, so we'll be tied for the best odds for the top 4 and the top number 1 pick, because that's the bottom 3. That's the way it works. Now, if we, obviously we're capped out at the worst pick. If the worst, we can only do 5. 5 would be the worst we can do. If we're the second worst, 6 is the worst we can do, and if we're third worst, 7 is. So there's still an advantage of moving up, but at least our odds for the top 4 and the top 1 will lock into that. And I think that's pretty much guaranteed at this point. In particular, because I was going to tell you who's coming up on our schedule. Our next game is Cleveland at home, Memphis at home, Houston at home, at Denver, at Charlotte. Okay, that's one that's going to be it'll be a tank off. And then at Houston, and then at Indiana. So look, other than one game, those are good teams, right, that are trying to win. So those are ones that are going to be very hard for us to win. Not that we want to win them. We can actually play players again, too, which is going to be great, like tonight, where Boson was in town. We could play some players. We could have even played more if they were healthy. So those games are good for us, so we can see our guys. But
yeah, it'll be nice to see Walker actually get some time against actually good players. So that'll be that's a big positive, obviously. The one other thing I want to mention tonight was obviously of the top possible draftees of the high lottery picks. I know everybody's watching Cooper Flagg, and Cooper Flagg today in the first round game got 14 points, 7 rebounds, 4 assists, and 2 blocks. And there was and people didn't know if he was going to actually play because he sprained his ankle in the ACC tournament. So there was question whether he'd be ready for the first round, and he obviously was. Is he 100%? I don't know. But he still played well. He shot 50%. He put up good numbers. Obviously, Duke blew out a bad team, so that's not a really big indication. We'll see what happens in the second round on this weekend. But I think that's one person to watch. And there's also, I know that this VJ Edgecombe guy for Baylor is also projected to be another top 10 pick. So he's playing in the tournament, and I'm not sure which other ones are. But obviously the Dylan Harper and what's the other guy's name on that team? Ace Bailey. Ace Bailey.
Yeah.
So Dylan Harper and Ace Bailey obviously aren't even in the tournament. So of the guys to watch, I know that the Cooper Flagg and the Baylor kid are two that are potential, but I think that more than likely the Baylor kid's going to be selected after where the Jazz are going to be picking. So anyway, it's just something to keep an eye on. It's just something interesting. And I know that everybody's watching NCAA tournament basketball right now, and the NBA for the next few days is kind of taking a back seat to the NCAA tournament, which is obviously one of the big sporting events of the year, especially the first and second rounds on yesterday and today.
Yeah, I think there was a lack of interest in the NBA over the last few days.
Yeah.
I got to tell you, I did not watch a single game just because I was busy, but I did check at Edgecombe's box score because I was just curious, and it wasn't good. I mean, it was okay, but he wasn't, at least from a box score, it wasn't fantastic. So I know he's a freshman, et cetera, and who knows, maybe there's seniors on the team with him that are getting more shots than him, et cetera. So it's one game, but it wasn't fantastic. And I think almost every game Cooper Flagg plays, he's putting up good numbers. And honestly, I think that's the same for Harper and Ace Bailey too. Now, the interesting thing with those guys, I've said this before to you, they're on a team that didn't even make the playoffs, and they're supposed to be number 2 and 3 in the draft. There's something wrong with that in my mind. Look, they're young players. Maybe they'll develop more, but I have a bit of concern with both of those guys, because if you're number 2 and number 3 in the draft, don't you think it'd be a little better as a team? It just like something is not resonating with me with that, with that team.
Yeah, I think in all honesty, I just think it's really hard to win with freshmen. I think that's a real big problem. And I think that's what ended up with Calipari at Kentucky. The whole trying to win the freshman each year ran its course, and he no longer won with freshmen. And so he left. And now he's at Arkansas, and he won a first-round game. It's hard to win with freshmen. It just is. And so I don't hold that much. I don't hold that against those guys that much. Yes, you say, okay, if these guys are both top 5 picks and they can't even make the NCAA tournament and their team is like a mediocre, middling 500 team, yeah, that's obviously there's some concerns there, but I don't know. I wouldn't hold that too much against them. It's just really hard to win the NCAA freshman. That's my opinion. Yeah, that's what I've seen over the years.
I still like Ace Bailey on the team. I'm not as high on Harper. And maybe I'm biased because I heard the smack that his dad was talking about Utah not wanting to be drafted by Utah. So now maybe got a massive chip on my shoulder against the kid. And that's probably not fair because his kid didn't say that, his dad did. But dads tend to influence their kids. But I do like Ace Bailey. I mean, he's able to create his own shot.
Who's his dad? Is that Ron Harper?
Yeah.
It is?
He talks smack. Yeah, it is.
Yeah.
And he talked smack about, I don't want to be drafted by Utah. Then he took it back. I didn't really mean it. So, stick it, Harper. Like, honestly, I've lived in Chicago where you played basketball. It's a dump. Fantastic pizza. The city's a dump. So just shut up. Quit criticizing my home state. Yeah, there's bad people in Utah. There's bad people everywhere. There's great people in Utah too. So just shut up and quit, criticizing. But Ace Bailey, the guy he reminds me of. The guy's now out for the year. He was the number 2 draft pick in front of Scoot Henderson for Charlotte. That he's able to create his own shot. He's able to shoot a 3-pointer. He's thin like Ace Bailey is.
Oh,
the difference
Brandon
in Ace
Miller,
Bailey is
Brandon Miller.
But the difference with Ace Bailey is that he can rebound too. So he's I like him. Now, do I think he's going to be a superstar like a top 10 player? That's really hard to do, and I don't think Brandon Miller ever will be a top 10 player, but is a guy who can be really helpful to your team. It's not Cooper Flagg. I like that. I like that guy. So we'll see. I've also admittedly not watched enough of any of these guys to really have an informed opinion.
Yeah, I can't really form an opinion either because I just don't know. I'm going to try and watch Cooper Flagg's second game, so we'll see what happens with that. Anyway, all right. Well, any other comments or call it a night?
No.
All right. Well, we are going to call it a night. For those watching on YouTube, please like, share, and subscribe. And you can also see us on X at Jazz Smack. And I hope that everybody has a great night, and we will talk to everyone later.